A YouTuber that I respect put out a video about downtime activity, and I don't agree with it. Zach the Bold went through and said that he doesn't run downtime, that he doesn't like downtime. It breaks tension, and that everything from a story mechanic needs to build that tension, and that you need to plan out downtime, plan out how it's going to affect the story, what it's going to bring in. So I'm back here again, underneath the DM cowl, to talk about why that's wrong. Why a system built for player agency shouldn't be down to what the game master has planned out. Those two things don't coincide. And hearing his case for not liking downtime, I heard how other people had been running downtime, or how he experienced downtime, and that's far off from how it's supposed to be as well. So no wonder people are having a hard time or a bad time with it. So let's delve in today about what makes good downtime. What is good downtime, what downtime is supposed to be, and why it matters. And for those of you who are new, I'm Pastor Game Master. Yes, I'm a pastor. Yes, I've spent 17 years as a game master for multiple systems. And yes, I am the man who ate Jonathan Frakes. So, moving on from that, downtime. What is it? Well, it's supposed to be the time in between all of the major events. And more than that, it's not just time between major events, it's the time that is allotted to the individual characters. I've always seen downtime as the end of each day, right? What are you doing in camp before you shut your eyes? We all get home from work and we all shed off a couple of hours to just be, to get the stress of the day off of us so that we can actually relax and go to sleep and do our things. Why wouldn't adventurers have the same? This downtime, they really just sitting there waiting for the food to cook, staring into the fire, doing nothing. And then 45 minutes, an hour later, they're just eating in silence. That doesn't make sense. No, downtime is this in-between time. It is the personal time. And players should be encouraged to use it as such. Zach the Bold was right about a few things. Game masters need to encourage the kind of downtime play that you want. And more than that, you need to help players express themselves. You need to see where players are starting to go, especially new players and players that are maybe playing a different class or a different system than what they're used to. Guide them. That's what the Game Master is for, is to be able to add player agency through guidance. But don't overplan everything. Don't plan out how your downtime is going to affect the story. Your players will do that for you. I need to prepare so much, and then your players go somewhere else and you're not ready for it. Stop over-preparing the parts that your players need to be writing with you. You can yell and scream and shout, oh, wow, this is so boring and everything else because it's not affecting the story. There's no tension, there's no stakes, there's nothing that can ever possibly go wrong, and it's just a break from reality. That's not right. Both sides of that aren't right. Tension exists because of the overarching story. I heard Zach the Bold say that downtime was used at the end of arcs, and that was probably the wildest thing I've ever heard. If downtime is only at the ends of arcs, I don't know, maybe it's just me. I always saw D&D and all these other fantasy tabletop RPG games as like Lord of the Rings, this Tolkien quest. And when you have that, then the downtime is part of that journey. The tension comes from everything else happening, knowing that the dark forces are marching on the land while you're sitting there eating your breakfast. Downtime is supposed to make you feel a little selfish, I think. I'm going to work on these skills, and we'll get into all of that in a little bit, because I know there's some GMs out there that teaching and not judging. But the tension comes from the story so far. I always treat downtime with my players, so they go, through a quest, and maybe they met an NPC. I always try to have some social encounters mixed in with combat encounters, and that way they can decide what kind of friends they want to make, what kind of people they want to be, how they want the adventure to plan out, things like that. A lot of times they wind up, want to really like this NPC for whatever reason, and we're going to make him like our stooge back in town or something like that. Like, okay, cool, fantastic. So now you get back from all your adventuring and stuff like that, and tension, right? The stakes that are in downtime shouldn't be about there having to be stakes, but if downtime is ignored, then that part of the world is going to have needs. Your stooge in town is going to say, hey, what do I do, boss? Right? How am I getting paid? How am I getting fed? Okay, that's tension, I guess, but it's not tension that I have to plan out. It's tension that the players naturally put into play just by it being there. Just by advancing that part of the world system, that's now there. That's why I believe in game mastering from a living world perspective, where things are still happening. This dungeon turn idea from the Gygaxian era should carry through so that we can all just have world motion that's not dependent on just what the players do, but it is impacted by what the players do. So interacting with the NPCs that they've built up so far, or interacting with just a place they wanted to go back to that they couldn't be, or going through and taking a moment to memorize something. And this is where we get into training and practice, right? On the road and like through an adventure, okay, you got 3 days journey. Well, okay, why not go through and have downtime? And I don't believe downtime should just strictly be like long rests or short rests, but like literally, okay, fantastic, you just got set upon by bandits, you got a whole bunch of like arrows in your cart, your animals are kind of wounded, like do you want to take an hour or two, sit here, kind of like bandage stuff up, right, fix things up a little bit. Okay, well, I'm not good at crafting and I can't help with the cart. Okay, but you're the cook. Do you want to prepare rations? Do you want to go through and maybe fish? We are by a river or an estuary right here, maybe, or a lake or something. Maybe you want to go through and take the time to hunt or scout about, climb a tree, send a eagle familiar out. There's always something to be done that can add to the story. Not just the plot, but to the story, right? We all knew the same tension was there. The dark forces are on the other side of the mountains and the forest, right? But when we send the eagle up, all of a sudden we're actually seeing like the smoke rising up like along where the foothills of the mountains are. Like we know the dark forces are now over the mountains. That's not new tension. That's just showing that the tension that was always there is actually tension. That's a living participant in the world. It'll progress this much maybe when you hit this point. That doesn't do much for anyone. There needs to be a time scale. Days, weeks, months. What actually is your march? We're all playing this with world maps anyways. Anybody that's doing a hex crawl, you know how many miles everything else is. We know how big these lands are. We know how long it should take an army based on whatever kind of transportation they have to get across mountains, to get over things. We can look it up. These are the things that the preparation needs to be, is what your world logic is and how large it is and how long it takes to cross. That's about it. Who fills that world is part of your preparation, but that's part of your adventure anyways, right? So the standard things in the preparation, if you're running an adventure module, most of those things are given to you. Downtime needs to be where players can experience their agency. Now, training and skills. We talked about it a little bit before, and a lot of game masters will say, okay, we're not doing like training or that kind of skills maxing or anything else like that. Like, you have to progress, you have to get the experience, we're playing it by the game book, we're rules lawyering it, we're doing it. That's ridiculous. I'm just gonna say it. For a game that has always said in like the first page, like these rules are guidelines for game masters to pull and make their games and their worlds to whatever their table wants to play, it is ridiculous to rules lawyer to any sort of degree, honestly. And that goes into the fact that you wind up homebrewing so much that you basically should just write your own game. And for those of you that do want to write your own game but don't have any idea of how to balance it, this is the shameless plug right here, because Mythic is the tool that you can use to write your own adventures without having to balance any game mechanics, because we've already done that for you. Alright, shameless plug over. Like, subscribe, ring the bell. If you want to go through and have a special move with a sword, if you want to have some sort of combat like slight advantage, if you want to get maybe a +1 on a very specific thing, if you have, you know, poison that you want to get really good at making it super lethal or have a certain effect because you know the concoctions, these are all the things that you can put into it. But the game master needs to provide certain give players ideas. So if you're a rogue, right, the poison idea, right, do you want to actually become part alchemist? I don't like how multi-classing has ever been in D&D, and so instead of dedicating multi-class and pulling certain things away from it, it's okay, what do you want from this other class? Because you can train that if you find somebody that is that thing or has that expertise, or the school or college or whatever, like depending on what it is, there's somebody that can teach that to you. There's some way you can learn it, and just that thing. You're not going to get any of the other advantages of that class, but maybe you just want this one thing. So we work on it. We train. We use downtime for that end because now guess what? Your agency has built a character that no one else has. So downtime is important. I call mine micro-downtime. Every bit that you would have to yourself. The bits right before bed where you're laying there in your sleeping roll or in your tent or in your inn. Maybe even just in a house that you have in town. You're laying there. You're awake. Are you just going to lay there for hours? Maybe you couldn't sleep. Maybe you don't need a rest. Maybe you just want to go downstairs and have a drink. Go to the local pub. Maybe you want to go through and empty the wineskin that you saved up for this journey and just howl at the moon. These can all bring different things. Howling at the moon, maybe some forest nymphs or some druids come over and see that you're in tune with your animalistic side, and they just want to go through and admire and howl at the moon with you. It's nothing that has to drive the plot, but it drives the character more than a backstory could. It ties in the character to the story in a way that a game master doesn't have to tie in your backstory. If we put so much forward context in your lore moving forward and everything that you're doing and the ways that you use your downtime, I can use all of that lore to tie in the game to you and then trace little things back to your backstory. Are you doing this because of this in your backstory? And then now guess what? I only have to tie into what you're actually doing with your backstory because that has now artificially created character psychology. Imagine that. Everything that we wanted to do in roleplay, just by asking these simple, broader leading questions and using downtime correctly, we gain all of these things that we just have left by the wayside. So again, I have nothing but respect and love for the fellow TTRPG YouTube community, but we can also admit that things and people that we respect and love can be wrong. Thanks for coming by, and I'll see you in the next session.